So I know you're my father and everything, and I just would like to know from you, what is your experience with Calvary Chapel?
Well, it's a mixed bag. There's many good Calvary chapels. There's some bad Calvary chapels. I've spoken to some of the largest Calvary chapels, particularly a church run by a pastor named Jack Hibbs. Me and Jack Hibbs became pretty close friends. He's a very nice guy. I spoke for him on a few occasions. He initially, when we first started Rescue Christians, I asked him to help in a case, to help one Pakistani who was escaping. We have these major blasphemy laws in Pakistan, and we had one case in which it needed a pastor to sponsor the person in order to rescue him, bring him to the U.S. Jack Hibbs was forthright, and he said he agreed to do it and everything else, and so we started a rescue team, snatch and rescue in Pakistan. This was going to go to Pakistan, and before the mission was to be initiated, they wanted to check that everything's in place. They called Pastor Jack Hibbs, are you ready for the sponsorship and all these things, and he canceled. And I was informed by the team, shocked of course. I called Jack Hibbs, and his wife came on the phone. And what his wife said was that she prayed to God, and God revealed to her that Jack shouldn't be involved in rescuing Christians from Pakistan. And I was shocked, and all of a sudden the pastor's wife was a mouthpiece from God, and it was rather disappointing. So I finally got in touch with Pastor Jack, and I asked him, what's that all about? And, he started waffling, and I was kind of disappointed. So I told him, look, at his church they had my pictures in the hallway, because I used to speak there. They had pictures of many speakers there, and I asked him to remove all my photos from the hallway, and he said, are you kidding? I said, no, I'm not, because I don't associate myself with cowards. That was my exact words. And I was pretty disappointed. And so from that moment on, he used to tell me that Calvary Chapel, Roger Wing would call him up, and when I used to speak at his church, kind of reprimanding him for allowing me to speak in his church. He had a lot of flack about dealing with me. I think he's a nice guy, but I think the pressure finally had him kind of, his wife somehow influenced him and said that she was speaking to God, and not to help rescue Christians. And so I was shocked to see this kind of thinking process, because rescuing Christians is one of the foremost things that the church is obliged to do. Widows, rescuing, helping fellow brethren. And so I began to see this sort of lack of care. In fact, out of all the Calvary chapels I spoke at, we've asked for the pastors in the churches, to help with rescue operations, to help, fund some of the things. Not one came through. There isn't. In fact, I could say I spoke at thousands of churches. It's not only Calvary Chapel, but I think maybe we got only one church pastor to support our initiative for rescuing Christians. I began to see fairly quickly that the churches in America are not really, a lot of them are not really interested, the pastors that is, the flocks. There's a lot of good flock out there. And so the moment you start bringing these issues out to the open, you say, well, Jack Hibbs or this pastor, people begin to think that, we have a vendetta, or you have a bitter issue towards somebody, which is not true whatsoever. I like Jack. Jack is a very nice guy. I like many of the churches I went to. But it's rather a very important issue to bring out, that the agendas of the churches in America are not really geared towards much of the action. In fact, I remember even in one Florida church, Calvary Chapel, I finished my first speech. We had a series of speeches. And the pastor canceled all the speeches because he said that I had stated that the mark of the beast would send a person to hell. And he says, well, some people in my church are naive and they don't understand the mark of the beast. What if they took the mark? They're not going to go to hell if they took the mark of the beast. And so I began to see that the churches are really being educated on rudimentary information, and they were always, trying to say you're talking to sheep, not giraffe, and you'll be asking when is the sheep going to become giraffe. So they kind of kick it up a notch or go in high gear about talking about issues of theology, of church unity, of the divisions that we have, denominational divisions, all these things, Protestant Catholic issues. It was a taboo. You couldn't discuss the serious issues that is causing the church to falter, divorce, all these things. So I find that even churches that I spoke at, Calvary Chapel, where the pastor fully agrees with you one day, and as soon as the other speaker comes, he fully agrees with the other speaker who said the opposite things of what I said. So I began to see that the pastors kind of buy into whatever the latest wave of theology that is sweeping through the church arena. And so I saw them very shallow, and the foundation was sinking sand. The hypocrisy is continual. And so I basically began to kind of cease from doing a lot of these issues and began to kind of focus on what God wanted me to do, and that is what Christ said. I was hungry, you gave me food. I was naked, you clothed me. He didn't say I was hungry and you spoke out for you spoke at Jack Hibbs' church. I was naked and you spoke at that big, large church. I remember the doors opened wide for me, TV, all these things, and I began to see that there's an issue of popularity and fame amongst churches. You got the Clifton dollars, you got these televangelists who really are selling absolute heresy to the flock, and there's absolutely no action. And Christ himself says, that he's looking for fruit.
They're spiritual drug dealers.
Well, yeah, you could say that. Spiritual drug dealers selling, whatever makes you feel good. And Christ says, you know them by their fruits. So I began to see every church I began to talk to, I began to say, hey, let's do something to the pastor. Would you be willing to do this or do that? They were absolutely not into action. They had these programs of maybe feeding the poor in the neighborhood, which is all fine and dandy, but to get into serious action in the society, pretty much it was kind of dead.